Hey guys, welcome back to Off House Brewing. Today we are making a massive Imperial Stout, bigger than what my mash tun is ready for. So I'm kind of going to walk through a few things that give you an idea of one, how to deal with a really big stout, how to deal with something that's a little bit bigger than that. Yes, even if you're an all-grain brewer, you're going to use some malt extract, and trust me, there's no shame in that game. This eventually is going to go into a rye whiskey barrel, so me and a couple friends, we're making a big recipe. We're going to start this with the goal of the OG being about 1170, and hoping that it'll get down, it'll probably finish around 1070 or 1060. So it's going to go in the barrel. It's going to dry out a little bit more, but that way the final product is still going to have this thick, luscious, viscous, kind of pastry stout base that we can use to manipulate however we want. Kind of the goal and the inspiration of this is if you ever heard of, there's a brewery in Southern California called Bottle Logic. The beer that we're trying to kind of recreate is called Fundamental Observation. It's a vanilla stout. So that's kind of where we're creating the base for. I'm going to walk you through the way that I do stouts, and which is a little bit different than you're probably used to if you just grind up all of your grain and throw it together. So we'll kind of get into that when we get into the mash. I'm not going to go through step by step with the mash and with the boil, because we've already kind of gone through that, and quite frankly it's a little bit boring. But we'll get into some of the issues that you may or may not have along the way, ways to boost gravity pretty easily if you don't have a mash tun big enough, and hopefully have a really kick-ass stout when it's done. I don't think I'll probably cut this off before we actually get the results out of the barrel, but we'll taste it before it goes in the barrel. So hope you enjoy, hang along, and we'll kind of see where this goes. Thanks. So there's about 12 minutes left in the mash, and like I said before, we're adding the dark grain after the fact. Putting it in too early, there's a decent chance that you're going to pull some astringency, that kind of puckering feeling that you can get, and you don't really want it. The thing is, with a mash, you don't really need a lot of time to be able to extract the chocolate and the coffee and all the, just dump it, and all the really good roast flavors that you think about in a stout. Yeah, you have to work it in, but for the time that it's going to take to sparge this out, and then you're going to add some more water with the secondary sparge, you're going to get plenty of good dark roasted flavors. You're going to get that chocolate, you're going to get that coffee, and particularly you're going to get that color. So don't worry about waiting this long to add it. I have done this for a couple of years now. I think that this is really the way to go, especially if you're making a really big stout. You spend all this time and all this money and investment in the grain, and for this one in particular, getting it a barrel that you want it to come out the way that you really desire it. And this is probably a good preventative measure to make sure that you get that. Okay, so we're into the boil. We just added 9 pounds, yes, you heard that right, 9 pounds of DME into this, which is going to be a 5-gallon batch. It started at 7.5 gallons. It's now about 9 gallons. So for every 3 pounds of dry malt extract, expect about half a gallon of volume increase. This is a mistake that I've made in the past, so please don't make it on my behalf. So hopefully you learn something out of this and can learn from my mistakes. So this has got to boil a little bit. The one thing that we're going to do that's a little bit different is, we'll get this up, that instead of throwing in, so it's already been boiling for 1 hour, it's going to boil for another hour. And right now with the 2-hour window, that should say that the 60-minute edition should go in the kettle. However, I know that it's going to take more than an hour to boil from 9-ish gallons down to about 6 or so, because I want to really go into the fermenter with about 5.5. So we're going to boil this down to about 8-ish gallons. Crank up the heat a little bit, get a little more of a vigorous boil going, and that's when I'm going to throw the first addition of the hops in, restart my timer, and then within an hour we should be up and going. So sometimes you have to make these adjustments along the way. Even though I've done this before, yeah, I kind of made this mistake. I've got another batch that I need to make right after this because it's a 15-gallon barrel, so make an adjustment next time. Simple as that. All right, so like I said, when you're trying to build some body and you don't have enough malt, you can use some lactose, maltodextrine. Well, the extract isn't for that. That's mostly just so I can get some extra gravity points. But this is, zoom back out, I mean, this is 9 pounds of malt extract that's going in a 5-pound batch, or a 5-gallon batch. Batch number 1 did get up to 1168, so only 2 points off. So even though, yeah, you can create body with things like mash temperature, you can create it with flaked oats. Every now and then, you can also do it with a little way of cheating, but I don't think there's anything wrong with that. The nice thing is maltodextrine doesn't ferment out, and it just kind of creates body, and lactose adds a little bit of sweetness, which for this kind of beer, that's going to have a lot of body and a lot of leftover sugar, and it's going to sit in a barrel, which is inherently going to dry out. This is the way to go. So just another way to kind of cheat the process a little bit and add a little bit to what you want your pastry stout to be anyway. All right, so we're coming up on the end of batch 2. I've added 9 pounds per 5 gallons of DME. I've added a pound of lactose. I've added 8 ounces of maltodextrine, and this is going to be a monster beer. The first one was 1168. This one is probably going to be about the same. It's all going to go into a barrel. So really kind of an easy recap. If you want to make a monstrous beer, some kind of pastry stout, I do suggest that you hold off on mashing the dark grains until maybe the last 15 minutes of the mash, 10 minutes of the mash. I've seen some people wait until you're into the sparge, portion of the mash. You're still going to get the color, you're still going to get the roast. You're not going to get the astringency though. So keep that in mind, that is something you're going to save. I mean, I did a 75-minute mash just because I know I wanted to do whatever I could to extract as much as possible. So trying to do a beer this big is not easy. Really appreciate the commercial brewers that do that. But I do think if you want to get to that pastry level, or you want to get to that really high level of final gravity, especially if you're going to put it into a barrel, because you're going to get some amount of drying out, you're going to get that very last bit of residual fermentation in the barrel. You want to finish something high, so this is the way to do it. Adding lactose adds body, adding maltodextrin adds body. Starting out at a ridiculously high OG and making sure to pitch a ton of yeast. I mean, I made an entire starter, like a 2-liter starter, and I have a whole nother pack of yeast that I'm going to add. I don't care what the calculators tell you, that's going to be fine. I have my fermentation chamber set at 62. I'm going to have this as a relatively open fermentation for this stout. So I have plenty of off-gassing, I don't have any back pressure. Use a bunch of firm cap, otherwise you're going to have an absolute mess. But if you don't get this down to 60, 62, 64 and hold it there, or something like that, and you think that you're going to be like, well, I'm going to hit 68, that temperature is going to be fine. It's not, okay? It is an exothermic reaction, meaning that it is going to create its own heat. Next thing you know is that fermentation in 2 days is going to be up to pushing 80 degrees, and it's going to be fusel as hell. So if you don't have fermentation chamber control, that kind of thing, for a beer this big, really I'd suggest not doing it. It's not going to be what you want. You don't want to leave it sitting in the secondary for 4, 6 something months. It's just not going to work. So there are ways to kind of cheat body. I say cheat because it's a way of doing it if you don't have an infinitely large mash vessel. So I just read an article with Corey King from Side Project, and I don't remember the guy's name, but the guy who owns Cycle down in Tampa, and how that they create these kind of beers. And they start with this 1150, 1170, 1180 type of OG and ferment it down, 100 points, and that's how they get that viscosity. That's how they get that super rich, sweet pastry character, which is what I'm going for. And it's going to go in a barrel. It's going to go in a freshly dumped rye barrel, and I'm looking forward to it. So I hope that you could find something in here that was useful, at least for trying to make a beer this big. I would suggest, if you're going to do a beer this big with a 2-hour boil, Don't do 2 in one day. I mean, I started at 8 o'clock in the morning. It is now 7:45 at night, and I got a few more minutes left in the boil. Don't do this. Okay, don't follow what I do for this aspect because this sucks. And I still got cleaning up to do. So I hope that you like this. Subscribe to the page. Please, like this and all that other kind of nonsense. I don't think that I have any helpful links of any fashion that I'm going to put below in the comments, but make sure to share this with your friends, and I will see you next time. Cheers. I don't know if I mentioned this, but this is going to be a collaboration with 2 of my friends. So we have three different batches. They are now in this graduated cylinder. We mix them 30 mil, 30 mil, 30 mil. And now we're gonna get to taste this before it goes in a barrel. Oh, you guys wanna, come on. Let's see how close I can get to 30. How much is that? That's a little more than that, but that's okay. I'll take a little less. So we're gonna wanna take this and try it. Here, let me adjust this before it goes in the barrel. There is a lot at risk here. And doing this is nice with a blend. You take some of the, I think, what did you say, Matt? It was
irregularities.
You're taking, some of the irregularities from batch to batch because they're all made a little bit differently. But it really kind of smooths it out. And even though we added a ton of lactose and maltodextrine, the one thing to keep in mind is that it doesn't have, it contributes gravity points, but it doesn't contribute any ABV, hence why all of the DME was in it. I think we all finished around 1068, 1069, so you're getting a lot of that gravity from those unfermentables. But the gravity read, I think the 2 that I did were around 14. I think yours is around 14%. And this is going to be a monstrous beer. Good project if you, are looking to make a really big kind of pastry-ish stout where you really have a lot of that mouthfeel. This is a way to do it. We kind of went probably a little bit over the top because this is going to go in a barrel. And it's going to dry out a little bit in the barrel. It's also have probably a higher IBU level. I think it's planned around about 70, which is more than you would normally want for some kind of pastry-ish, big ass stout. But some of that is going to die no different than it does with an IPA when it sits in the barrel for 5 to 8 months, something like that. We're gonna get this in the barrel, and maybe in 6, 7, 8 months, when we pull it out, we'll do another video on a tasting where we can kind of sit down and talk about the different variants that we're gonna make. We're gonna be YouTube geeks too, so like this, share it. There's a bell or something like that. Subscribe, and we'll see you next time.